Sophia has spent years as the unacknowledged pillar of her family, bearing the financial and emotional weight for her parents and her perpetually irresponsible younger sibling. The ultimate betrayal arrived when her parents, without a shred of permission, sold Sophia's hard-earned car, meticulously forging her signature on the transfer documents. This act pushed Sophia past her breaking point, shattering her last vestiges of hope for reconciliation. For the first time in her life, Sophia chose self-preservation over family obligation, reporting the theft and forgery to the police. The investigation rapidly exposed her parents' deceit, leading to severe legal repercussions for them and the crumbling of her siblings' plans. Despite the brutal fallout and emotional abuse, Sophia stood firm, cutting all ties and embarking on a new path, understanding that her peace was worth any cost. The fluorescent hum of the office lights seemed to vibrate against my temples, a low-frequency drone that had become the soundtrack of my life. I stared at the spreadsheet on my monitor, the numbers blurring into meaningless black squiggles before snapping back into focus. It was 8:15 p.m. Most of the floor was dark, save for the cleaning crew moving silently through the cubicles and the glow of my solitary lamp. I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the knot of tension that lived there permanently. It was a familiar companion, born of long hours, insufficient sleep, and the crushing pressure to perform. Here, in the glass and steel heart of the city, I was Sophia, the senior analyst. Competent, reliable, indispensable. I was the woman who solved problems. But outside these walls, I was just the bank. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, vibrating against the hard surface like an angry insect. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken years ago. My mother, Ibu Shri, smiling in a garden. Back then, her smile had felt warm. Now, seeing her name flash on the screen triggered a Pavlovian response of dread. My stomach tightened, a cold stone dropping into a pool of acid. I didn't want to answer. I wanted to pack up my laptop, take the elevator down to the basement parking, get into my Honda Civic, my silver sanctuary, and drive until the city lights faded into the ocean. But I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello, Ibu?" "Sophia." Her voice crackled, tight and laced with a manufactured fragility. "Are you still working? It is so late. A woman should not work so hard. It makes her face look old." "I have a deadline, Boo," I said, my voice flat, already slipping into the defensive crouch I assumed whenever we spoke. "Is everything okay? Is Bappa all right?" "Bappa is fine, physically," she sighed, the sound heavy with theatrical martyrdom. "But his heart is heavy. We miss you, Sophia. You haven't visited in 2 weeks. The neighbors were asking if you had moved abroad." "I was there last Sunday, Boo. I brought groceries." "Sunday feels like a lifetime ago when the house is this empty," she countered seamlessly. "Come for dinner tonight. Adit is here. He has news." The stone in my stomach grew heavier. Adit, my younger brother. The golden boy who could do no wrong, despite a track record that suggested he could do nothing right. If Adit had news, it meant Adit needed money. And if Adit needed money, I was the one who would be bleeding. "I'm tired, Boo. Can we do this weekend?" "Oh, Sophia." The tone shifted from sorrow to sharp disappointment. "We are family. Demi keluarga, Sophia, just for an hour. Bappa has already told the cook to make your favorite rendang." It was the trap I walked into every time. The weaponization of affection. The guilt, thick and suffocating like humid air before a storm. "Okay," I whispered, closing my laptop with a snap. "I'm coming." The city was weeping. Rain lashed against the windshield of my Civic, turning the traffic lights of Jakarta into smeared streaks of red and amber. I gripped the leather steering wheel, taking a deep breath of the interior air. It smelled of vanilla air freshener and faint coffee, the scent of my independence. I had bought this car 3 years ago. It wasn't a luxury vehicle by the standards of the executives I worked with, but to me, it was a chariot. I had saved for 2 years, eating instant noodles and skipping social outings, meticulously socking away every rupiah until I could put down the down payment. Every monthly installment I paid was a validation of my existence. This metal box was the only space in the world where nobody asked me for anything. It was the only thing I owned that Ibu and Papa hadn't claimed credit for. Traffic was gridlocked, a river of steel crawling toward the suburbs. It gave me too much time to think. I looked at the rain drumming on the glass and thought about the promotion I had turned down last month because it would require relocation to Singapore. It was my dream job, but when I had floated the idea to my parents, the reaction had been apocalyptic. Who will take care of us? You would abandon your aging parents for money? I had stayed. I always stayed. Turning into the driveway of my childhood home, the sense of dread returned sharper this time. The house was modest, a single-story structure with a peeling white fence I had paid to have painted last year. The lights were blazing inside. I parked the Civic carefully, locking it twice. I always checked the handle. It was a habit born of paranoia, a need to ensure my escape pod was secure. The moment I stepped through the front door, the humidity of the house hit me. It smelled of frying oil, clove cigarettes, and old carpet. Bapa Budi was sitting in his usual armchair, the television blaring a soap opera. He didn't look up as I entered. "Assalamualaikum," I said, placing my wet umbrella in the stand. "Walaikum salam." He grunted, eyes fixed on the screen. "You are late. Traffic was bad, Pak." "Traffic is always bad. You should manage your time better." I bit the inside of my cheek and walked into the dining room. Ibu Shri was setting the table, her movements bustling and energetic, betraying the fragility she had claimed on the phone. And there, sitting at the head of the table, was Adit. He was 24, 3 years younger than me, but he carried himself with the unearned confidence of a king. He was wearing a new branded t-shirt, one I knew cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and tapping away on the latest iPhone. "Kak Sophia," he grinned, finally looking up. "Long time no see." "I saw you last week, Adit," I said, pulling out a chair, "when you needed data for your phone." "Details, details." He waved a hand dismissively. Ibu bustled over, placing a bowl of steaming beef rendang in the center of the table. She kissed my cheek, her lips dry. "Eat, eat. You look thin. People will think we don't feed you." We ate in a tension-filled silence for 10 minutes. The rendang was delicious, rich and spicy, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. I waited for the other shoe to drop. I knew the script. First the food, then the small talk, then the guilt, then the ask. "So," Ibu began, wiping her mouth delicately with a tissue, "Adit has been working very hard on a new project." I put down my spoon. "What happened to the drop-shipping business or the graphic design course I paid for?" Adit rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair. "That stuff is for losers, Kak. Low margins. I'm talking about real investment now. Import-export. My friend Rian knows a guy in customs. We can get electronics in without the heavy tax. We just need initial capital for the first container." I stared at him. It was so transparently foolish, so obviously a scam or a fast track to jail, that I almost laughed. "Adit, that sounds illegal and risky." "It's not illegal if you know people," Bapa Budi chimed in from the living room, his voice booming. He walked in, dragging his feet, and took his place at the table. "The boy has ambition. You should support that." "I support ambition, Pa," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I supported him through university, which he didn't finish. I supported 3 different startups. Where is the return on investment?" "You sound like a bank manager, not a sister," Adit sneered. "Everything is about money with you. You think because you work in a high-rise, you're better than us." "I think because I work, I understand the value of money," I shot back, my patience fraying. I can't fund this, Adit. I have bills, I have car payments, I have rent. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The temperature seemed to drop. Ibu Shree's face crumpled, her eyes filling with instant, weaponized tears. "Rent," she whispered, as if I had said a curse word. "You choose to live in that apartment, wasting money to live with strangers when you have a home here. And now you refuse to help your brother, your only brother." "It's not about refusing to help, Ibu. It's about enabling him to fail again. I don't have 50 million rupiah lying around for a scheme." 50 million? Papa slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "You make that in 2 months. Do not lie to your father. We know what you earn." "And I have expenses," I cried out, the veneer of calm cracking. "I am saving for my own future. Do I not get to have a life? Do I exist only to fix Adit's mistakes?" "Selfish," Ibu hissed. She stood up, walking over to Adit and wrapping her arms around his shoulders, hugging him protectively. He smirked at me from within her embrace. "We sacrificed everything for you, Sophia. We sent you to the good schools. We went without so you could study. And now, when the family needs you, you talk about your future. We are your future." "Adit is drowning," Bapa said, his voice low and dangerous. "He has debts, Sophia. If he doesn't pay this investment fee, he will be in trouble, big trouble." I looked at Adit. The smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. "Debts to who?" I asked. "Just people," Adit mumbled, looking at his plate. "It's not an investment, Kak. I owe money. Online gambling. If I don't pay by Friday..." Silence stretched taut across the room. The import-export business was a lie. Of course it was. It was always a lie. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 20 million, Adit said. "You said 50 earlier," I snapped. 30 is for me to start over," he said, trying to regain some bravado. I looked at my parents. They weren't shocked by the gambling. They knew. They had brought me here to ambush me, to clean up the mess so they didn't have to face the shame of a son in debt to loan sharks. "I can't give you 30, I said, feeling the defeat wash over me like cold water. "I can pay the debt, the 20 million, directly to the creditor. But that is it. No cash for you." "Sophia," Ibu pleaded, "give him a little extra, so he doesn't feel like a beggar. His dignity is not my line item." I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. My hands were shaking. "I will pay the 20. That is it. And don't ask me for anything else this month or the next." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app and aggressively tapped the screen. The balance dropped significantly. That money was supposed to be for my insurance premium and a weekend trip I had planned. My first vacation in 2 years, gone, vaporized into the black hole of Adit's vices. "Send me the account number," I told Adit coldly. He texted it to me, not meeting my eyes. I made the transfer. "Done," I said, showing them the screen. "Are we happy? Is the family saved?" "Don't take that tone," Bapa grumbled, picking up his fork. "You did your duty. That is what a daughter does. Sit down, finish your rendang." "I'm not hungry," I said. I grabbed my purse. The air in the house was choking me. I needed to get out before I screamed or cried. "You're leaving?" Ibu asked, her voice returning to its normal pitch now that the transaction was complete. "But we haven't had dessert." "I have work in the morning, Ibu, unlike some people." I didn't look at Adit. I walked to the door, putting on my shoes with jerky, angry movements. Behind me, I heard the clink of cutlery resuming. They were eating. They were moving on. The crisis was averted. The resource had been extracted, and life could continue. I stepped out into the rain. It was pouring harder now, a tropical deluge that drowned out the world. I ran to my Civic, fumbling for the keys. Once inside, I slammed the door and locked it. The silence of the car enveloped me. I didn't start the engine immediately. I just sat there in the dark driveway, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I looked at the dashboard, at the odometer. 45,000 kilometers, every single one of them driven by me. This car was the physical manifestation of my hard work. It was the only boundary they couldn't cross. They couldn't drive it. They didn't have the keys. It was mine. Tear, hot and frustrating, pricked my eyes. I wiped them away angrily. I wouldn't cry for them, not anymore. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, a comforting array of blue and white lights. I connected my phone and turned the music up loud, heavy bass, something angry, to drown out the memory of Ibu's manipulative tears and Adit's entitled smirk. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw the curtain in the living room twitch. Ibu was watching. Who was checking to make sure I was really gone, or perhaps just ensuring the bank was closing for the night. I shifted gears and accelerated, the tires spinning momentarily on the wet asphalt before gripping. I drove fast, faster than I should have, desperate to put distance between myself and the house that demanded everything and gave nothing. The city lights blurred past me. I was going back to my empty apartment, to my unpaid bills, to the hollow feeling of being used. But at least I was moving. At least I was driving my own car on my own road. For now, that had to be enough. The concrete slab of the carport was staring back at me, a blank grey eye where my silver Honda Jazz should have been. I stood there, the morning humidity of Jakarta already clinging to my skin, my hand frozen halfway into my purse to retrieve my keys. I blinked, once, twice, assuming it was a trick of the light or a momentary lapse in memory. Had I parked on the street last night? No, I never parked on the street. The neighborhood kids played soccer there, and I was terrified of a stray ball shattering a window I couldn't afford to fix. I stepped closer to the empty space. A small, dark oil stain, the one I had been meaning to scrub away for weeks, marked the center of the void. It was the only proof that my car, my sanctuary, my one tangible purchase from 5 years of skipped lunches and overtime shifts had ever existed. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. I spun around, scanning the narrow alleyway in front of our house. Nothing but the neighbor's rusted motorcycle and a stray cat picking through a garbage bag. "Papa!" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the humid air. I rushed back toward the front door, fumbling with the handle. "Ibu!" I burst into the living room, the sudden transition from the bright outdoor glare to the dim yellowed interior leaving me momentarily blind. The house smelled as it always did, a mixture of stale frying oil, damp plaster, and the heavy sweet scent of Bapa's clove cigarettes. The television was blaring a variety show, the laugh track grating against my frayed nerves. Bapa Budi was sitting in his rattan chair, a plume of smoke curling lazily from his lips. He didn't look up. Ibu Sri was on the sofa, methodically folding a pile of Adit's t-shirts, smoothing out the wrinkles with a tenderness she rarely showed anyone else. "The car," I gasped, breathless not from exertion, but from the rising tide of fear. "My car is gone. I think someone stole it." I expected them to jump up. I expected Bapa to grab his phone or Ibu to clutch her chest in shock. Instead, the room remained suffocatingly still. The only movement was Ibu's hand, flattening a grey sleeve. "It wasn't stolen, Sophia," Ibu said. Her tone was terrifyingly casual, the way one might mention the weather or the price of chili peppers. I froze. My bag slid off my shoulder, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. "What?" Bapa finally turned his head. His eyes were heavy-lidded, red-rimmed from years of smoke. He took a long drag from his kritek, the crackle of the burning cloves, the only sound in the room for a long second. "Sit down, Sophia. You're making the room dusty with all this rushing about." "I don't want to sit down," I snapped, my voice trembling. "What do you mean it wasn't stolen? Where's my car?" Ibu set the folded shirt aside and picked up another. She refused to meet my eyes. We sold it yesterday afternoon while you were at work. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The words didn't make sense. They were speaking a language I couldn't comprehend. You sold it? How? It's my car. The papers are in my name. The keys were in my drawer. We found the spare key. Bapa grunted, tapping ash into a ceramic bowl. And don't look at your mother like that. It had to be done. It's in my name, I screamed, the sound tearing out of my throat. You can't sell something that doesn't belong to you. How did you even transfer the title? The dealership wouldn't take it without my signature. Ibu finally looked up. Her expression wasn't one of guilt, but of mild annoyance, as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum over a spilled drink. We handled it. A friend of Papa's. He knows people. We signed the transfer documents for you. It wasn't difficult. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees gave way, and I sank onto the hard wooden armrest of the sofa. You forged my signature? That's a crime. That's fraud. Watch your mouth, Bapa barked, pointing a stained finger at me. Do not speak of crime in this house. We are your parents. We have given you life. We have a right to manage the family's assets as we see fit. My assets? I cried, tears hot and angry stinging my eyes. Mine! I paid for the down payment. I paid every single monthly installment for 4 years. I paid for the insurance. I paid for the gas. You didn't put a single rupiah into that car. And who put the roof over your head? Ibu countered, her voice rising to match mine. She threw the t-shirt down. Who fed you? Who clothed you? You act as if you live in a vacuum, Sophia. You think your money is just yours? In this family, we help each other. Help? I laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. This isn't help, Ibu. This is theft. Why? Why did you do it? Where is the money? I already knew the answer before they spoke. It hung in the air, ghosting around the framed photos of Adit that cluttered the walls. Adit graduating high school. Adit winning a soccer trophy 10 years ago. Adit smiling his charming empty smile. Adit needs it, Ibu said, her voice softening into that sickening reverence she reserved only for him. He has an opportunity, a wonderful business opportunity with his friends. Import-export. But he needed capital immediately. If he didn't pay by this morning, he would lose his spot. So you sold my car, I whispered, the betrayal feeling like a physical blow to the gut. To fund another one of Adit's scams? Just like the coffee shop venture? Just like the online trading scheme? That money is gone, Ibu. It's gone. Don't be jealous of your brother, Papa growled. He is trying. He is a man. He needs to build a legacy. What do you need a car for? You take the bus to the office. It's cheaper. You were wasting money on petrol anyway. I need it for my freedom, I shouted, standing up again, my hands balling into fists. I need it so I don't feel trapped in this house every second of every day. It was the one thing I owned, the one thing that was just mine. Selfish? Ibu hissed, shaking her head in exaggerated disappointment. Always so selfish. We are in a crisis, Sophia. We needed cash. We didn't have time to wait for you to come home and argue and debate and stingy pinch every penny. We did what was necessary for the survival of this family. I am the survival of this family, I yelled, the dam finally breaking. I pay the electric bill. I pay for the groceries. I pay for your medicine, Bapa. I paid off Adit's gambling debt last year. And now you steal my car? You forge my name? Bapa stood up then, his frame towering over me. Despite his age, he still carried an air of menacing authority. We did not steal. We utilized resources. And you will lower your voice. The neighbors will hear. Let them hear. I stepped back, trembling. Let them know their neighbors are thieves. Bapa took a step toward me, his face darkening. You are an ungrateful child. After everything we sacrificed, we raised you to be a good daughter, to be berbakti, and this is how you repay us? By counting pennies? By threatening us over a piece of metal? It's not about the metal, I sobbed, my voice cracking. It's that you don't respect me. You don't see me. I'm just an ATM to you. I'm just a signature you can forge. It's for the family, Ibu chanted, the mantra she used to absolve herself of every sin. Adit promised he will pay us back double in 3 months. Then you can buy a better car, a Mercedes maybe. You just have to have faith in your brother. He won't pay it back, I said, my voice dropping to a dull, flat tone. The energy was leaking out of me, replaced by a cold, heavy realization. He never pays it back. And you know it. He will, Ibu insisted, though her eyes darted away for a fraction of a second. And until then you will adjust. You will take the ojek or the bus. It is not the end of the world. I looked at them. Really looked at them. Papa, extinguishing his cigarette and immediately reaching for the pack to light another. Ibu, picking up the laundry again, her hands moving with a rhythmic, denial-fueled efficiency. They weren't sorry. They weren't even worried. They truly believed that my submission was the natural order of the universe. They believed that my autonomy was a clerical error they had every right to correct. A strange silence settled over the room, filled only by the murmur of the television. They thought the argument was over. They thought they had won, just as they always did, by crushing me under the weight of obligation and guilt. They expected me to cry in my room for an hour, then come out, wash my face, and ask what they wanted for dinner. Who bought it? I asked quietly. A dealer in South Jakarta, Bapa mumbled, settling back into his chair, satisfied that the storm had passed. Don't bother looking for it. It's probably already stripped for parts or sold to someone in another province. The paperwork is done. The paperwork you forged. The paperwork we signed, he corrected firmly. As your parents. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was a vibration. A frequency of rage so pure it felt like a new power source. I looked at the spot on the wall where the car keys usually hung. The hook was empty. Adit knows? I asked. Of course, Ibu said. He was so happy, Sophia. He said, but Sophia is the best sister. He said he will buy you a nice gift when the profit comes in. They had stripped me. They had taken the metal shell that protected me from the world, the engine that allowed me to outrun the suffocation of this house, and they had fed it to the black hole of my brother's incompetence. I didn't scream again. I didn't throw the vase that sat on the table. The sudden calm that washed over me was terrifying. It was the calm of a structure that had been structurally compromised and was now simply waiting for gravity to do its work. I'm going to my room, I said. Good, Bapa said, not looking away from the TV screen. Stop making a scene. We will eat at 7. Make nasi goreng. I walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my feet. I passed Adit's room. The door was closed as usual. He was probably out spending the money already, or perhaps sleeping until noon, secure in the knowledge that his safety net was woven from the fibers of my life. I entered my room and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I turned the lock with a soft click. My room was small. A single bed, a wardrobe, a small desk. It was the only space in the world I had left. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the opposite wall. The betrayal wasn't that they prioritized Adit. I had known that since I was 6 years old. The betrayal was the forgery. It was the violation of my name. By signing for me, they had declared that I did not exist as a separate legal entity from them. They had declared that I was property. I closed my eyes and saw the car again. The way the dashboard lit up at night. The smell of the vanilla air freshener. The feeling of the steering wheel under my palms. The control. They sold it. They forged my name. Ibu's voice echoed in my head. It wasn't difficult. They had broken the law, not a family rule or not a social grace, but the actual law. And they were sitting in the living room watching a variety show, expecting me to make fried rice. I opened my eyes. The tears had stopped. The sadness was gone, replaced by a clarity so sharp it hurt. They thought this was just another episode in the long drama of our family life. They thought I would bend, as I always bend. But a car is not a t-shirt. A forgery is not a borrowed $10. I looked at my phone lying on the bedspread. It was black and silent. If I did nothing, this would be my life forever. I would work, they would take. I would build, they would destroy. I would be 40, 50, 60 years old, still folding myself smaller and smaller to fit into the pockets of their needs. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty carport again. The oil stain seemed to mock me. It's just metal, Ibu had said. No, it was my escape, and they had stolen it. But they had forgotten one thing. They had stolen the vehicle, but they hadn't stolen the driver. I turned away from the window and looked at the phone again. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird-like rhythm. I knew what the fallout would be. I knew the nuclear explosion that would occur if I took the next step. It wouldn't just be an argument. It would be war. It would be the end of us. But looking at that empty driveway, I realized there was no us anymore. There were just 3 parasites and a host. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wasn't just calling for help. I was calling to declare independence. The front door slammed behind me, a wooden thunderclap that severed the humid air of the living room from the stifling heat of the Jakarta afternoon. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I turned around, I would see the silhouette of Ibu Sri in the window, her face twisted in that familiar mask of martyred disappointment, or hear Bapak Budi's muffled shouts about loyalty and blood. My feet moved on instinct, carrying me down the cracked pavement of our neighborhood. My chest heaved, each breath a jagged shard of glass in my lungs. I wasn't crying. I had cried enough over the years, silent tears in the bathroom while checking my depleted bank account, angry tears in the pillow after Adit's 3rd emergency bailout. This sensation wasn't sorrow. It was a cold, vibrating numbness that started in my fingertips and worked its way up to my jaw. I walked without a destination, passing the warung, where the smell of frying tempeh and clove cigarettes usually comforted me. Today, the scents were nauseating, thick and oily. The chatter of neighbors, usually a background hum, felt abrasive, like sandpaper against my raw nerves. They waved, smiling faces oblivious to the fact that just 10 minutes ago my entire world had been liquidated for the sake of a brother who had never worked a hard day in his life. They sold it. The thought looped in my mind. A broken record playing at a distorted speed. My Honda Jazz. It wasn't just metal and rubber. It was 5 years of overtime. It was skipped lunches and mended clothes. It was the only tangible proof that Sophia existed for Sophia, not as an ATM for the family. And they had signed my name. That was the splinter in my brain that refused to dislodge. It wasn't just theft, it was identity theft. They had worn my skin to rob me. I stopped at the intersection, the traffic lights blurring into streaks of aggressive red and yellow. My hand went to my pocket, clutching my phone. The screen was dark, but I knew what lay within. Missed calls from Adit, likely begging or threatening, and frantic texts from Ibu, telling me to come back and stop being dramatic. Dramatic? I whispered to the exhaust-filled air. I am being dramatic. The gaslighting was a masterful art form in our house. For a terrifying second, the old conditioning kicked in. Maybe I was being selfish. Whatever Adit's new venture was, crypto, dropshipping, another doom cafe, maybe this time it would work. Maybe the car was a small sacrifice for the family's future. Then the memory of the transfer document flashed in my mind's eye. The curvature of the S in Sophia. It was shaky. A poor imitation. Bapa had done it. I could picture him, sitting at the kitchen table, wearing his reading glasses, carefully committing a felony while Ibu poured him tea. The banality of their betrayal is what hardened the cement in my stomach. They didn't do it in a moment of desperate passion. They did it with calculation. I hailed a bluebird taxi, my arm shooting up with a mechanical jerk. When the car pulled over, I slid into the cool, air-conditioned interior. "Where to, Mbak?" the driver asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. I must have looked deranged. Hair escaping my bun, eyes wide and unblinking. I opened my mouth to say a friend's name, or a mall, anywhere to hide. But the words that came out were heavy, final. "Polsek Mampang," I said, "the local police station." The driver nodded, pulling back into traffic. The silence in the cab was absolute, a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. Every meter we drove felt like I was stretching a rubber band that connected me to my parents. It was getting tighter, screeching with tension. Reporting your parents to the police. In our culture, it was the ultimate sin. Durhaka. The rebellious child, the ungrateful daughter. I would be a pariah. The extended family would whisper. The neighbors would stare. But if I turned back now, if I let this slide, I would cease to exist. I would just be a resource to be mined until I was empty. The police station was a squat, concrete building painted a tired shade of beige. It smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and bureaucratic apathy. I walked through the glass doors, the sudden chill of the AC hitting the sweat on my neck. The room was sparsely populated, a couple arguing in hushed tones in the corner, a man filling out a form with agonizing slowness, and a row of officers behind a high counter. I approached the desk. The officer, a middle-aged man with a name tag reading Hartono, didn't look up immediately. He was typing on a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Excuse me." "Pak," I said. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. Officer Hartono stopped typing. He looked up, his eyes weary but sharp. "Yes? What can I do for you?" "I need to report a theft." "Motorcycle? Phone?" He reached for a notepad, his demeanor routine. "My car," I said. "And forgery?" He paused, the pen hovering over the paper. "Car theft. Did it happen today?" "Yes, well, I found out today it was sold." "Sold." He frowned, confusion crinkling his forehead. "If it was sold, it's a civil matter, Mbak. Unless it was stolen and then sold." "My parents sold it," I said. The words tasted like ash. I had to force them past my teeth. "They took the car, forged my signature on the ownership transfer documents, and sold it to a dealership without my knowledge or consent." Officer Hartono slowly placed the pen down. The routine boredom left his face, replaced by a cautious scrutiny. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the counter. "Your parents," he repeated, ensuring he heard correctly. "Yes." "And the car is in your name? Fully paid?" "Yes. BPKB, STNK, everything is in my name. I have the digital copies on my phone, but the originals were in my room. They took those too." He sighed, a long, weary sound that spoke of too many years dealing with domestic disasters. "Mbak, are you sure you want to file a criminal report? This is difficult. Once we start the investigation, it becomes a legal matter. Section 263 of the Criminal Code for forgery. Section 362 for theft. These carry prison sentences. We can't just scare them and drop it later." He was giving me an out. He was offering me the chance to go back to being the good daughter, the doormat, the silent victim. I could walk out, go home, scream into my pillow, and spend the next 3 years paying for a car I didn't have while Adit squandered the money. I looked at the scuffed linoleum floor. I thought about the confrontation an hour ago. Ibu Sri hadn't said sorry. She had said, "You have a job, You can get another one. Adit needs a chance. They didn't see me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an extension of their will. I looked up, meeting Officer Hartono's gaze. My hands were trembling, so I clenched them into fists on the countertop. I understand the consequences. Peck, I said, my voice dropping an octave, steadying. They committed a crime. I want to file the report. He held my gaze for a long moment, assessing my resolve. Then he nodded, a shift in respect visible in his eyes. He reached under the counter and pulled out a fresh form. Sit down here. He gestured to a metal chair beside the desk. I need your ID, then tell me everything from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. I sat. The metal was cold against my legs. I handed over my KTP, my identity card. Name? Sophia, I said. Date of incident? Today, but the forgery, probably 3 days ago. Suspects? I closed my eyes for a heartbeat. I could see them in my mind. Ibu pouring tea. Bapa reading the paper. Adit laughing at the television. My family. My blood. Budi Santoso and Sri Wahyuni, I said, and possibly Aditya Santoso as an accomplice. The officer began to type. The clack, clack, clack of the keyboard was the sound of bridges burning. Each keystroke was a brick being pulled out of the foundation of my life. Tell me about the signature, Hartono prompted. I saw the bill of sale at the dealership before I came here. I lied slightly. I hadn't been to the dealership, but I knew the paperwork existed. I corrected myself. I know they have the documents. My father, he has practiced my signature before, for school notes years ago. He knows how to mimic the loop of the S. Intention, Hartono muttered as he typed. Okay, and the proceeds? Do you know where the money went? To my brother, I said, the bitterness rising like bile. He has debts or a business plan. It changes every week. So, financial gain. Premeditated. Hartono stopped typing and looked at me. This is going to get ugly, Sophia. We will have to bring them in for questioning. Probably tonight or tomorrow morning. We will need to seize the documents from the buyer. Do you have a place to stay? I assume you aren't going back home. I hadn't thought that far ahead. The house was no longer a home. It was a crime scene of emotional violence. I have a friend, I said, realizing I would have to crash on Nina's couch. I can go there. Oh, good. He printed out the statement. The printer whirred and groaned, spitting out 3 pages of dense text. He slid the stack across the desk toward me, along with a black ballpoint pen. Read it, he commanded softly. Make sure every word is accurate, then sign at the bottom. I picked up the paper. The text was dry, legalistic, stripping away the emotion and leaving only the cold, hard facts. The victim alleges. The suspects are accused of forged instrument. It looked so clinical. It described a crime committed by strangers, not the people who taught me to walk. But as I read, the clarity of it empowered me. This was the truth. For years, the truth in our house had been fluid, warped by my parents' needs and Adit's whims. Here on this paper, the truth was black and white. They stole. They lied. I reached the bottom of the page. The line for the signature waited. My hand hovered. The biological imperative to protect one's parents is a powerful thing, woven into DNA and reinforced by decades of societal pressure. I felt a wave of nausea. If I signed this, I was sending the police to my parents' door. But then I remembered the keys. Not the car keys, but the house keys they had taken back from me when I argued, effectively locking me out until I apologized. I remembered Adit's smirk. I remembered the way Bapa looked right through me. They had already broken the bond. I was just signing the death certificate of our relationship. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed dark and permanent. I signed my name, my real signature, not the shaky forgery Bapa had created. I signed it with a flourish, a reclaiming of my identity. Sophia? I put the pen down. The sound was a sharp click in the quiet station. Done, I said. Officer Hartono took the papers, stamped them with a heavy, rhythmic thud-thud, and handed me a copy. We will process this immediately, he said. Keep your phone on. We will call you when we bring them in. I took the paper. It felt light, yet it carried the weight of a mountain. Thank you, Pak, I said. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I walked back toward the glass doors, toward the heat and the noise of Jakarta. The sun was setting now, casting long bruised purple shadows across the street. I was homeless, carless, and effectively an orphan by choice. But as I pushed the door open and stepped out into the chaotic evening air, I took a deep breath. It smelled of exhaust and frying oil just like before. But for the first time in my life, the air didn't feel like it was being rationed. It felt like mine. The silence in the house following my return from the police station was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air before a tropical thunderstorm breaks. I sat in the corner of the living room, a book open on my lap that I hadn't looked at in an hour. My eyes were fixed on the front window, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of afternoon sunlight that cut across the threadbare Persian rug. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the creak of the floorboards upstairs, where Adit was likely sleeping off another late night. My parents were in the kitchen. I could hear the clink of ceramic against ceramic, Ibu making tea, and the low rumbling murmur of Papa's voice. They were likely discussing what to buy with the money they believed was secured, oblivious to the fuse I had just lit. When the knock finally came, it wasn't the tentative rap of a guest. It was 3 solid, authoritative thuds that vibrated through the wood and settled deep in the pit of my stomach. The murmuring in the kitchen stopped instantly. "Sophia, get the door!" Papa yelled, his voice carrying that familiar, effortless command. He expected obedience. He expected the world to keep turning exactly as he ordained it. I didn't move. I turned a page of my unread book, the paper rasping loudly in the quiet room. "Sophia!" he barked again, louder this time, followed by the heavy tread of his footsteps approaching the living room. "Are you deaf?" I said. He stopped when he saw the silhouette through the frosted glass of the front door. He froze, his eyebrows knitting together in confusion. Even through the distortion, the shape of a uniformed officer was unmistakable. Bapak smoothed his batik shirt, his posture shifting from aggressive patriarch to the charming community elder he pretended to be. He shot me a glare that promised retribution for my laziness later, then opened the door with a wide, practiced smile. "Good afternoon, officer," Bapa said, his voice dripping with honeyed hospitality. "To what do we owe the pleasure? Is there an issue in the neighborhood? Please come in, come in." 2 officers stepped over the threshold. The first was an older man with weary eyes and a name tag that read Prasetyo. The second was younger, holding a clipboard and a grim expression. They did not return the smile. The air temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Budi Santoso?" Officer Prasetyo asked. He didn't take off his cap. "Yes, that is me," Papa said, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "And this is my wife, Shri," he added as Ibu emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face a mask of polite curiosity. "We are here regarding a report filed this morning concerning the theft of a vehicle and the forgery of legal transfer documents," Prasetyo stated. His tone was flat, professional, and utterly terrifying in its lack of emotion. Ibu let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Theft? Oh, officer, surely there is a mistake. We are a respectable family. We don't have thieves here." The report was filed by the owner of the vehicle. The officer continued, ignoring her interruption. He looked past them, his eyes locking onto mine where I sat in the corner. Miss Sophia Santoso. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical blow. Bapa slowly turned his head toward me, his neck stiff, his eyes widening not with fear, but with a blind, white-hot rage. Ibu covered her mouth, her eyes darting between me and the police, the gears of victimhood already turning in her mind. Sophia, Bapa whispered, the name sounding like a curse. What is this nonsense? I closed my book and placed it on the side table. My hands were trembling, but I clasped them together so no one would see. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, but I forced my chin high. It's not nonsense, Papa, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, yet steady. I reported the car stolen because it was. You ungrateful child, Ibu shrieked, rushing forward but stopping short when the younger officer took a step between us. It is a family matter. Officer, she is confused. She is stressed from work. We are her parents. We made a decision for the family. Selling a vehicle registered in another person's name without their consent is not a family decision, Ma'am. It is grand theft, Prasetyo said, pulling a clear plastic folder from his clipboard. And assigning that person's name on a transfer of title is forgery. That is a felony. He held up a photocopy of the document. I could see it from where I stood, the jagged, hesitant loop of the S. It was a clumsy imitation of my signature, one that looked nothing like the swift, sharp autograph I had developed over years of signing corporate contracts. This document, Prasetyo pointed to the signature line, was submitted to the dealership yesterday. Mr. Budi, we have statement from the dealer that you presented this. We have CCTV footage of you signing it at his desk. Bapa's face went from red to a pale, sickly grey. The arrogance that usually acted as his armor was cracking. He looked at the document, then at me. His eyes pleading for me to stop this, to take it back, to fix it like I fixed everything else. Sophia, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, trying to create an intimate conspiracy in front of the law. Tell them you gave permission verbally. Tell them we just expedited the paperwork. Don't do this to your father. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had demanded my salary for 10 years. The man who had sat at this very table and told me I was selfish for wanting to keep the one thing I had bought for myself. I remembered the smirk on his face when he told me the car was already gone. I never gave permission, I said clearly to the officer. I did not sign that paper. That is a forgery. You little witch! Bapa lunged, his hand raised to strike, a reflex honed by years of unchecked dominance. Sir, step back. The younger officer was fast, grabbing Bapa's wrist and twisting it behind his back. The sudden violence of the action shocked the room. Papa cried out, more in indignation than pain, as he was spun around and pressed against the wall. Budi! Ibu screamed, dropping to her knees. Don't touch him! He has high blood pressure! Sophia, stop them! Tell them to stop! I can't stop the law, Ibu, I said. You broke it, not me. The commotion had woken Adit. He appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair messy, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What the hell is going on? Why are the cops here? He looked down, seeing our father pinned against the wall, the officers handcuffing him. Adit's face went slack. Dad? Adit! Ibu wailed, crawling toward the stairs. Your sister! She's arresting us! She's sending your father to jail! Stay back, ma'am, Officer Prasetyo warned, stepping between Ibu and Bapa. Mrs. Sri Santoso, you are also named in the investigation as a co-conspirator regarding the financial transaction. We need you to come down to the station for questioning as well. Me? Ibu gasped, clutching her chest. But I am a mother. I only did what was best for my son. Adit needed the money for his venture. Sophia didn't need that car. That is a confession, ma'am, Prasetyo noted dryly, nodding to his partner. The reality of the situation began to bleed out of the house and into the street. The front door was still open. I could see Mrs. Vijaya from next door standing by her gate, pretending to water her orchids, her ears practically swiveling toward our house. 2 other neighbors had stopped on the sidewalk, whispering. In our culture, the family name is a shield. It is polished and displayed, protecting the rot inside. Today, that shield was being smashed to pieces on the front lawn. "We are taking them in for processing," Prasetyo told me. "We will need you to come by later to formally identify the documents again and provide a supplementary statement." "I understand," I said. As they led Bappa out, he didn't look at me. He kept his head down, trying to hide his face from the neighbors, his shame finally outweighing his pride. But Ipu looked at me. As she was guided out the door, tears streaming down her face, her expression was one of pure, distilled hatred. "You are dead to me," she hissed, the venom in her voice so potent I physically recoiled. "You destroy your family for a machine? You will die alone, Sophia. No one will want a traitor." Then they were gone. The police car door slammed shut, sealing them inside. The engine started and the vehicle pulled away, leaving a heavy cloud of exhaust fumes hanging in the humid afternoon air. I stood in the center of the living room, the silence returning, but changed. It wasn't waiting for a storm anymore. It was the wreckage after the hurricane. "Are you happy now?" I turned. Adit was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He looked smaller than usual. Without our parents flanking him, without the promise of the money to prop up his ego, he looked like exactly what he was, a 25-year-old child. "Happy isn't the word, Adit," I replied, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. "They're going to jail," he said, his voice trembling. "Mom and Dad, to jail? Because of you?" "No," I corrected him, my voice sharpening. "Because they stole? Because they forged a signature? Because they thought they owned me? It was just a car," he shouted, throwing his hands up. "I was going to pay you back. Once the business took off." "There was no business, Adit," I snapped, the anger finally breaking through my calm facade. "There never is. It's always a scheme, and it's always funded by me. But this time you all decided that stealing from me was easier than asking. You decided I didn't matter." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing. "So what happens now? Who's going to cook? Who's going to pay the bills if Dad's accounts get frozen? What about me?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but it wasn't fear for our parents. It was fear for his own comfort. He wasn't worried about justice. He was worried that the gravy train had just derailed. "I don't know, Adit," I said, walking past him toward the stairs. I needed to be alone. I needed to wash the feeling of this room off my skin. For the first time in my life, that isn't my problem. I went into my room and locked the door. It was a flimsy lock, one easily picked, but the symbolic weight of the click felt like a fortress gate slamming shut. I walked to the window and looked out. Mrs. Vijaya was still there, now talking animatedly to another neighbor, gesturing toward our house. The gossip was spreading like wildfire. By evening, the entire community would know that the Santoso family, pillars of the local association, were criminals. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number, likely a relative who had already heard the news. I didn't check it. I turned the phone off and tossed it onto the bed. I sat down at my desk, my hands still shaking. I looked at my own signature on a notepad lying there. The real one. Sharp, decisive, mine. A deep, cavernous ache opened up in my chest. It was, didn't regret. I knew I had done the only thing I could do to survive. But it was grief. I was grieving the family I never had. I was grieving the parents who should have protected me, not preyed upon me. I was grieving the brother who should have been my friend, not my parasite. The house below was silent, save for the sound of Adit pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. The sun began to set, casting long dark shadows across my room. I didn't turn on the light. I sat in the gathering dark, listening to the silence, feeling the terrifying, exhilarating weight of my own freedom pressing down on me. The bridge was burned. There was no going back across the chasm. I was alone on the other side, and for the first time, the air felt breathable. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse corridor hummed with a low, insect-like buzz that seemed to vibrate against the inside of my skull. It was a sterile sound, matched only by the scent of ammonia floor cleaner and the stale, recycled air that made every breath feel heavy. I sat on a wooden bench, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking, staring at the scuff marks on the linoleum. When the doors to the courtroom swung open, the sound was like a gunshot in a canyon. Bappa walked out first. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The bravado that usually puffed out his chest, the arrogance of the patriarch who believed his word was law, had deflated, leaving behind a hollow, shuffling old man. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. The suspended sentence and the heavy fines were lighter than jail time, but the criminal record was a brand on his forehead that no amount of prayer or community standing could wash away. Ibu followed, clutching a handkerchief to her nose, her eyes swollen and red. Unlike Bappa, she looked directly at me. Her gaze wasn't filled with remorse. It was a cocktail of disbelief and betrayal, as if I were the one who had forged the signature, not them. "It is done," my lawyer, a sharp woman named Bhuratna, said softly as she stopped beside me. She adjusted her glasses, looking from my parents to me with a pity I didn't want. "The restitution order is filed. They have 6 months to pay back the value of the car. If they default, the court will seize assets." "Thank you, Boo," I whispered, standing up. My legs felt like lead. "Is that all?" "Legally, yes," she said, clutching her briefcase. "Personally, Sophia, take care of yourself. The law can fix the money, but it cannot fix the home." I nodded, knowing she was right. The drive back to the house, in a taxi since my car was gone, and the money to replace it was still a theoretical number on a court document, was suffocating. The silence in the cab was preferable to what I knew awaited me. But eventually, the familiar peeling gate of my childhood home came into view. Entering the house felt like walking into a mausoleum. The air was stagnant, thick with the smell of frying oil and unwashed curtains. In the living room, the television was off, a rarity. Adit was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. He looked up as I entered, and his face twisted. The charming, boyish grin he used to charm investors and our parents alike was gone, replaced by a snarl of raw panic. "Are you happy now?" Adit spat, standing up so quickly he knocked a coaster off the table. "Are you satisfied, Kak? You humiliated them. You dragged them through the dirt in front of everyone." I walked past him toward the stairs, my exhaustion serving as a shield. "They broke the law, Adit. They stole from me." "It was a loan," he screamed, his voice cracking. He followed me, his footsteps heavy and aggressive. "We were going to pay you back once the business took off. But now? My investors pulled out this morning. Who wants to do business with a family labeled as fraudsters? You didn't just sue them. You nuked my future." I stopped on the second step and turned to look down at him. For years, I had seen him as a child needing guidance. Now I saw a 25-year-old man who had never been told no. "There was no business, Adit," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "There was just another scheme, and it wasn't a loan. You don't forge a signature for a loan. You do it for a theft. You selfish bitch," he hissed. The front door opened behind him. Bappa and Ibu had arrived. The atmosphere in the room shifted from volatile to oppressive. Bappa walked straight to his armchair and collapsed into it, staring blankly at the wall. Ibu, however, dropped her bag and marched to the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me with trembling lips. "How could you?" she wailed, the sound piercing and theatrical. After everything we did for you, we fed you, we clothed you, we prayed for you, and this is how you repay us? By making your father a criminal? I didn't make him a criminal, Ibu, I said, gripping the banister. He made himself one when he signed my name on that title transfer. You both did. It was for the family, she shrieked, striking her chest with her fist. For your brother. He is the son. He needed help. What is a car compared to your brother's future? You have a job. You can get another car, but you chose to destroy us over metal and rubber. I chose to stop being your victim, I corrected her. Victim? Bappa spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble like grinding stones. He didn't turn his head. You are no victim. You are an ungrateful daughter. You have shamed us. The neighbors are whispering. The mosque committee asked me to step down. My face is gone. You took it. You sold it, I said, feeling a strange, cold clarity washing over me. You sold your integrity for Adit's gambling money disguised as a startup. And you expected me to foot the bill again. I turned and walked up the stairs, ignoring Ibu's continued sobbing and Adit's muttered curses. I went to my room, the room I had paid to renovate in the house whose bills I had paid for 6 years, and pulled my suitcase from the top of the wardrobe. The sound of the zipper opening was the loudest thing in the world. I didn't pack everything. I didn't want everything. I took my clothes, my documents, the few pieces of jewelry I had bought for myself, and my laptop. Every item I placed in the bag felt like I was cutting a thread that tethered me to a sinking ship. I looked at the photos on my dresser. Me at graduation, flanked by proud parents. A lie. They were proud of the potential income, not the daughter. Me and Adit as children. A lie. He wasn't my brother. He was their golden idol, and I was just the offering plate. I swept the photos into the trash bin. The glass of the frames cracked with a satisfying crunch. When I dragged the suitcase downstairs 10 minutes later, the tableau hadn't changed much. Adit was pacing. Ibu was sitting on the floor by Papa's feet, weeping into his lap. It was a scene straight out of a soap opera, designed to elicit guilt. It washed over me like water of oil. Where do you think you're going? Adit demanded, blocking the path to the door. Move, Adit, I said. You think you can just leave? He laughed, a manic, incredulous sound. You think you can blow up this house and just walk away? Who is going to pay the electricity next week? Who is going to pay the fine the court just issued? You owe us that much. The audacity was so immense, it was almost impressive. Even in the wreckage of their own making, they were still reaching for my wallet. I owe you nothing, I said, stepping closer to him. I looked him dead in the eye. I have paid for this house 10 times over in sweat and tears. I paid for your college degree that you don't use. I paid for the roof that keeps you dry. The debt is settled. If you walk out that door, Ibu cried out, scrambling to her feet, you are dead to us. Do you hear me, Sophia? Do not come back when you realize nobody else will love you like your family. Do not come crawling back when the world eats you alive. I stopped with my hand on the brass doorknob. The metal was cool under my palm. I looked back at them one last time. The living room was dim, the shadows stretching long and distorted across the floor. They looked like ghosts, angry, hungry ghosts. I'm not worried about the world eating me alive, Ibu, I said quietly. I've been living with cannibals for 28 years. The world will be a vacation. Get out, Papa roared, finally snapping, throwing an ashtray across the room. It shattered against the wall near my head, showering the floor with ceramic shards and grey ash. Get out and rot. I didn't flinch. I turned the knob, opened the heavy teak door, and stepped out onto the porch. The evening air hit me instantly, humid, smelling of rain and exhaust fumes. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. I pulled the handle of my suitcase, the wheels rumbling over the tiled porch, a rhythmic, finalizing sound. Thump, 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 thump. I walked to the gate, the rusted hinges screeching in protest as I pushed it open. I didn't look back at the window where I knew Ibu was watching. I didn't look back at the cracks in the driveway or the garden I had tended. A taxi was waiting at the curb, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. I lifted my suitcase into the trunk, the physical exertion feeling good, grounding. I slid into the back seat and closed the door. "Where to, miss?" the driver asked, eyeing me in the rearview mirror. I leaned back against the seat. My bank account was drained from legal fees. My car was gone. My family had just declared me dead. I had no furniture, no plan beyond tonight, and a hotel reservation for 3 days. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they hurt. For the first time in my life, the breath was mine. "Just drive," I said, watching the house disappear as we pulled away. "Take me to the city center." As the house faded into the distance, swallowed by the twilight and the mundane traffic of the city, the crushing weight on my chest began to lift, replaced by a terrifying, beautiful emptiness. It was the space where my burden used to be. Now it was just space, and it was mine to fill. The silence in my new apartment was not empty. It was heavy, textured, and profoundly strange. For the first week, I moved through the rooms like a burglar, stepping lightly on the laminate flooring, unconsciously bracing myself for the sudden slam of a door or the shrill narrative of my mother-mass complaints. But the noise never came. There was only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rhythmic whoosh of traffic on the main road 3 stories down. I sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by half-open cardboard boxes. The afternoon light filtered through the sheer curtains I had picked out myself, a soft dusty blue that Ibushri would have hated. She would have called them depressing, insisting on something garish and gold to project a wealth we didn't have. I ran the fabric through my fingers, feeling the coarse weave. It felt like victory. My phone sat on the windowsill face down. I had changed my number 3 days ago. The act itself had felt like an amputation. I remembered standing in the mobile provider's store, my hand trembling as I signed the paperwork. It was the final severance of the digital umbilical cord. I knew that back at the house, or whatever remained of it after the asset seizures began, Adit was likely screaming into a receiver that would never connect to me again. The thought brought a spike of adrenaline, a phantom panic that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I had to close my eyes and breathe through it, counting to 10, reminding myself that I was geographically and legally unreachable. "Coffee," I whispered to the empty room, just to hear my own voice. It sounded steady, surprisingly calm. I walked to the kitchenette. It was a galley style, narrow and efficient. I filled the kettle. The water rushing from the tap was cold and clear. I watched it swirl into the metal basin, mesmerized by the simple physics of it. No one was going to criticize how much water I used. No one was going to demand I make them a cup while I was at it, only to complain it was too sweet or not hot enough. As the kettle boiled, I retrieved a mug from the drying rack. It was a ceramic piece, hand-thrown with an imperfect rim. I had bought it at a market yesterday for an exorbitant price, simply because I liked the way the glaze shifted from seafoam to grey. I poured the water, the steam rising in a hot, damp cloud that smelled of roasted beans and freedom. A knock at the door made me jump, splashing a little hot water onto my wrist. The burn was sharp and grounding. I froze, the old instinct to hide flaring up. They found me. But then a muffled voice called out, "Sof, it's Maya. I brought the pizza." I exhaled, a long shuddering breath that seemed to empty my lungs completely. I unlocked the deadbolt. The satisfying thud of the heavy metal sliding back was music to my ears, and opened the door. Maya stood there, laden with 2 flat boxes and a bottle of wine, her face etched with a tentative concern that softened into a smile when she saw me. "You look," she started, stepping inside and kicking off her shoes. She paused, searching for the word. "Lighter. You look lighter." "I feel lighter," I admitted, taking the wine from her. "But also untethered. Like a balloon that's terrified of floating away." We settled on the floor, using a sturdy moving box as a makeshift table. The pizza smelled of basil and garlic, a rich, savory aroma that filled the small space. For a long time, we just ate, the comfort of an old friendship filling the gaps where words weren't necessary. Maya had been the one who drove me to the police station that day. She was the one who held my hand while I gave the statement about the car, the forgery, the years of financial bleeding. She knew everything. "Have you heard anything?" Maya asked eventually, her voice low, careful not to shatter the mood. I took a sip of wine, the tart red liquid coating my tongue. "From the lawyer?" "A little. The prosecution is moving forward with the fraud charges against Bappa and Ibu. Because the amount was so high, and because of the forgery, it's not looking like a slap on the wrist." Maya nodded slowly, picking at the crust of her pizza. "And Adit?" "Adit is realizing that the world doesn't care about his dreams if he can't pay for them," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "The creditors he borrowed from, banking on the money from my car sale, they aren't as forgiving as a sister. He's on his own." "Do you feel guilty?" Maya asked. It wasn't an accusation. It was a necessary excavation. I looked out the window. The sky was turning a bruised purple as the sun dipped below the city skyline. "I feel phantom pains. You know, like when someone loses a leg, but they can still feel the toes itching. I wake up worrying about the electricity bill at the old house. I catch myself looking at men's shirts in store windows, wondering if Adit needs one for an interview. And then I remember what they did. I remember the look on my father's face when the officers arrived. Not shame, but fury. Fury that his property, his daughter, had dared to speak. I turned back to Maya. So no, I don't feel guilty. I feel grief. I'm grieving the family I wanted, not the one I had." Maya reached across the cardboard box and squeezed my hand. Her grip was warm and solid. "You saved your own life, Sophia. I hope you know that. If you had stayed, you would have drowned with them." "I know," I whispered. Later that evening, after Maya had left, I decided to tackle the last box in the corner. It was taped shut with excessive layers of packing tape, a testament to my frantic state when I packed it. I sliced through the tape with a key, my new house key. Inside were the few personal treasures I had managed to smuggle out. My degree certificate, framed but dusty. A photo album from my university years. And at the bottom, a small leather pouch containing the spare set of keys to the car. The car that was gone. The car that had been the catalyst for this entire nuclear explosion of my life. I held the keys in my palm. The metal was cool. For a moment, rage flickered in my chest, hot and corrosive. I had worked double shift for that car. I had eaten instant noodles for 2 years to make the down payment. It was supposed to be my escape pod, and they had sold it for parts to fund a fantasy. But as I sat there, the rage began to recede, replaced by a strange clarity. The car was gone. Yes, but the woman who had the discipline to buy it? She was still here. The woman who had the strength to walk into a police station and report her own parents. She was sitting on this floor. I stood up and walked to the balcony door, sliding it open. The night air rushed in, cool and smelling of rain and asphalt. I stepped out onto the small concrete railing. The city was a grid of lights below me, a vast pulsating organism of millions of lives. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the leather pouch. I looked at the car keys one last time. They were keys to a cage I no longer lived in. With a fluid motion, I tossed them into the trash bin I kept by the railing for recycling. They landed with a dull clink. "Goodbye," I said to the darkness. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The sun was streaming across the duvet, painting a bright geometric shape on the wall. I stretched, my limbs extending fully, taking up the entire space of the double bed. There was no dread in my stomach, no knot of anxiety tightening my throat. I dressed in clothes that felt like me. A crisp white shirt and tailored trousers, not the drab, shapeless things my mother preferred I wear to avoid attention. I had a job interview at 10. It was a position in a city 2 hours away. A role I would never have applied for before, because I couldn't leave my parents alone. Now, the distance felt like a bonus. I walked to the bus stop. The air was crisp, signaling the turning of the season. As I waited, I watched the people around me. A mother fixing her child's collar, a student reading a book, a man laughing into his phone. Normalcy. It was beautiful. When the bus arrived, I tapped my card and found a seat by the window. As the vehicle lurched forward, merging into the traffic, I didn't look back toward the neighborhood I had fled. I looked forward. Through the windshield, the road stretched out, grey and open. The horizon was not a limit, but an invitation. I pulled a notebook from my bag and opened it to a fresh, blank page. I uncapped my pen. For years, my story had been written by other people. They had held the pen, forging my signature, dictating my narrative, editing out my happiness to make room for their demands. I rested the tip of the pen on the paper. The ink bled a tiny, dark dot. Chapter 1. I thought, smiling as the city blurred past the window. I began to write, not a ledger of debts, not a list of chores, not a letter of apology. I wrote a list of things I wanted. 1. Peace. 2. A garden, even just a window box. 3. To learn Italian. 4. To never be afraid in my own home again. The bus accelerated, picking up speed as it hit the highway. The vibration of the engine hummed through the soles of my shoes, traveling up my legs, settling in my chest as a buzzing electric energy. It was the feeling of momentum. I was alone. I had lost my car, my family, and the life I had known for 25 years. I had scars that no one could see and a legal battle that would likely drag on for months. But as I looked out at the skyline, expanding and rising to meet the clouds, I realized I had gained the only thing that truly mattered. I was driving. Finally, I was driving.